Can I just check that everybody that wants to get admitted on the Zoom has been admitted so far? Yes? Silence is not an answer. Do we have everybody admitted on Zoom that wants to come in so far? And we'll say welcome to them. Right. Okay. And then turn left. Yeah, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this morning's event. We're glad you could join us. The focus of the morning today is key considerations in raising capital, brackets for business. And we're going to have a conversation around that in terms of what investors are looking for from you as investees. So the criteria that they use to determine whether or not they're going to give you a loan or whether they are going to provide you with equity. But we'll have that conversation in a minute. But my name is Sean Duggan, so I'm going to do some quick introductions. I'm responsible for the investment promotion component of the EU-funded Investment Promotion and Business Linkages Program here in Ghana. And our implementation partner is the Association of Ghana Industries, and we are very pleased that we're able to co-host this event with them and our other colleagues from Bridgewater Associates. No, Bridgewater Advisors, isn't it? I keep getting this wrong. Sorry, Prosper. We've hosted a number of these boardroom breakfasts over the past 18 months. We've found, in terms of the responses from individuals in the audience, that there's a certain amount of aggravation that businesses are not getting the funding they want. And in part, this is because those businesses are not considered to be investment ready by investors. So the consequence of that is that we genuinely believe that there is more to do in terms of providing information and feedback from an investor perspective to help businesses fully understand what it is that investors are looking for. And that's been the theme of these conversations to date, and we'll continue that theme today. So we have a very interesting lineup of speakers this morning, but in the first instance, before I introduce those as part of our panel, I'm going to introduce this gentleman here. Don't be shy. Because Prosper Melomi. I keep practicing, but I don't get it right sometimes. He heads up Bridgewater Advisors. See, I got it right this time. And he is going to take us through some of the key considerations that you as businesses need to think about in terms of your decision to get funding. So Prosper, can I ask you to take the main stage and take us through your initial presentation before we go into a wider conversation? Okay, thank you. So hands together for Prosper, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure if we have a lot of agri-businesses represented here. Okay. So we have virtually an agri-business table, more or less. So my name is Prosper Melomi, as Sean introduced. I'm a partner at Bridgewater Advisors Limited in Ghana. And as Sean rightly mentioned, I just want to take you through some key considerations when it comes to raising capital. We also have amongst us certain key players within the capital space in Ghana. We have Oasis Capital and Adefco here. But for my session, I'm going to take you through certain key components when it comes to raising capital. I'll start off by addressing what we do as a firm, that's Bridgewater Advisors, who we are, what we do, and why I'm here. I mean, we have a good relationship with AGI. We went into a memorandum of understanding to help members within AGI to address the subject of capital. And so on that ticket, we were invited to come and handle this presentation. So if we could go to the presentation, I'll take it out from there to the content. Please, let's pardon the technology, but we'll get going. Okay, can we go to the contents, please? All right, so like I mentioned, I'm going to address Bridgewater Advisors, what we do, and then I'll walk us through the capital landscape in Ghana, a bit of Africa as well. Then we will cover the business life cycle and its capital implications, and then some key considerations in raising capital. Then we round up with some Q&A. I hope I'm able to go through quickly within the time frame. So Bridgewater Advisors is a boutique investment banking firm focused on Africa. When it comes to investment banking in Ghana, usually there's the assumption that you manage funds or you advise people as to where to invest. But that's not our business. Our business is primarily in capital raising, restructuring, and then mergers and acquisitions. We also offer a spectrum of corporate finance advisory services in financial modeling and valuations. We also advise along the infrastructure and capital projects line of business. Now, over the years, we as a firm have worked significantly within the market, both in Ghana and outside of Ghana, to build relationships with financial institutions. We have currently relationships with about 53 plus financial institutions with a combined assets in the value of 20 billion. That is assets within this network, looking for investments within the African market, not necessarily Ghana. By virtue of our affiliations and relationships, we have relationships with over 50 deal-making partner firms. So what that means is we have relationships with other firms like Bridgewater in Africa and Europe and in America. In terms of deals we've advised on transactions within the full spectrum of corporate deals and infrastructure in excess of 10 billion. Most of the huge ticket transactions have been in the infrastructure landscape. When it comes to capital raising, what we've done within the SME space is raise over $100 million when it comes to the SME landscape. Right. So we can move on to the overview of the capital landscape in Ghana, and that's my starting point for today. So the idea here is generally to give everyone a fair sense of what is happening when we talk about the capital landscape in Ghana. I know, as Sean mentioned at the beginning, that there's this agitation by businesses when it comes to access to finance. But generally, we all need to be clear on what exists, and then we look at what is going on in the market. My intention is to give everybody a fair idea of what is going on actually on the ground. So let's move on, please. Let's go through the full. So we have about 16 development finance institutions active in Ghana, 46 venture capital funds, that is funds within Ghana and outside Ghana with interest in Ghana. And then we have 60 private equity firms, some in Ghana, some outside of Ghana, but with primary interest in Ghana. We know we have about 23 domestic banks in the market. We have 2 leasing companies, And then we have about 363 non-banking financial institutions. This gives you a total view of what is happening as far as the capital landscape is concerned. And so if you are a business and you are thinking about capital, this is more or less an array of what is going on within our space. I did not mention the Ghana Stock Exchange, but that is also, we have three markets. We have the main market, the alternative markets. We have the fixed income market for raising debt instruments. And then we also have government agencies that support businesses. So this is generally what we'll call the capital landscape in Ghana. We'll do our best to share these slides when we are done, so you can have some of these things to refer to. Okay, so let's look at the private capital deals in Africa, starting off with that. So we are looking at a period of 2021, and then half year this year, and then we did an estimation to end of year. The data available covers half year of this year. So we used a run rate to estimate what the values will probably look like by the end of the year. So looking at asset classes such as venture capital, total transactions in Africa in 2021 was 4 billion. Half year this year is 2.7 billion. Infrastructure came in at 1.8 billion for 2021. And then private equity, 1.4 billion. Private debt, about 200 million. So venture capital, we are projecting, based on what has happened, the data we have for half year, to go to about 5 billion. So this once again shows there's a lot of traction on the African market. As far as distribution is concerned, in terms of volumes of transactions within these asset classes, we have the venture capital taking about 74%. Now, for those who may not fully know what a venture capital fund is, these are funds that invest in risky businesses at the very, very early stage of their journey. So it's kind of indicative of how the African business landscape is looking like. We have a lot of young businesses with ideas. And so we have a lot of venture capital deals within the space. This year also, pretty much the same story from 2021. The venture capital space is leading. Private equity in itself looks at investments in more matured businesses. As we go through the capital life cycle, we understand the various stages of businesses. And so private equity in this sense looks at more matured businesses. And we don't have many of such businesses that can absorb PE funds. You know, and so that hasn't recorded much of transactions on the continent. Now let's look at Ghana by venture capital transactions. So we have half year, we have 133 million in deals for this year. That's half year. And then for 2021, 78 million. Now, if we look at the deal count in terms of volumes over the past 4 years, or let me say 3 years with half year of this year, we see it rising from 2 all the way to 223 in 2021. This year, so far, we've seen about 21 VC deals on our markets. So the next thing is to look at how these deals are distributed across the various industries. So we see healthcare taking a chunk of it. That's 26. It's no surprise. We know what has happened with COVID from 2020. Then we have a financial services coming in, and then IT, industrials, and communication services. Well, we don't have a lot of agribusiness here in terms of transactions, but we'll discuss that later. Now, the next thing is to look at domestic credit to private sector. So looking at how much credit within our economy has gone to the private sector. As at 2020, we have about 9.2 billion of domestic credit going to the private sector. And we have this, the line you see there measures domestic credit as a percentage of GDP. So we see the line declining over the period. It does not necessarily mean that it's on a decline. Although you see a marginal decline in 2020 from 19, but usually, I mean, you can look at COVID implications. But as GDP went up, we look at that comparison and it hasn't matched as far as percentage is concerned. But pretty much we can see over the period, values ranging from 8 to 9 billion seem to be what the domestic credit market is lending to the private sector. So this doesn't cover what government is borrowing. This is just private sector. Now, to have a fair sense of how the debt market is responding to businesses, we looked at debt outstanding by Bank of Ghana to sort of paint a picture of how banks and other debt providers are lending on our market. So as at 2020, in the first chart on your left, we see services coming, leading, and then commerce and finance second. But for those of us, a majority of us here who are agribusiness related, that's the highlighted blue, 4%. Well, if you look at this in totality, this is indicative of the fact, or gives us an idea that the debt market isn't really big on agribusiness. It shrunk a bit in 2021 to 3% of credit outstanding. So let's move on to the development finance institutions. So development finance institutions are set up by countries to support investment in developing markets or emerging markets across the world. And so we looked at how the DFIs are positioned within our market and what they are doing. So we see 41% of DFI funds skew towards energy, and then 22 to finance. We see oil and gas and transport coming in, tourism, and then agribusiness being 2%. Once again, just to highlight for those who are interested in agribusiness. Mind you, these are huge chunks of funds, so 2% is still a lot of money. Okay, so now let's look at FDI flows to Ghana and understand how this is also going. So FDI shrunk in 2020, but generally we are looking at something within the region of $2.6 billion to $3 billion being the FDI flow. And so this is how much foreign direct investment, the impact is more or less having on our economy or coming into our country. We are looking at $2.6 to $3 billion. In terms of how this is spread across industries, or let me say in volumes, the sources and the volumes. We see most of our FDI coming from China in terms of volumes. However, in terms of value, as at 2021, most of the values came from Singapore. So those businessmen looking for relationships within Ghana, this sort of gives, outside of Ghana, this sort of gives a fair idea of where to pursue relationships. You know, so you have China, India, the US is there, UK, Lebanon, Norway, Singapore. So agribusinesses within the space, it appears these countries seem to have good appetite for our country. Now let's move on to FDI flows in Ghana by sector. So we are looking at the period 2021 and 2020. Once again, services leads the way. Then we go to oil and gas. Or let me say, in 2020, manufacturing, led the way in terms of flows. And then, but the huge chunk between the two periods goes to services. Agribusiness in 2021 wasn't that much. And in 2020, they didn't see much at all. Okay, so now let's look at funds with interest in Ghana. So we are looking at private equity funds with interest in Ghana. These funds, please let everything show. These funds are both, we are looking at funds both in Ghana and outside of Ghana. So we have 28 PE funds in Ghana and 32 outside of Ghana, but with interest in Ghana. From our research, we were able to put together, for those who have disclosed their funds, about 10.7 billion in terms of fund size. And then we looked at by fund count, how many are expressing interest in these various industries. And interestingly, most of these funds seem to have agribusiness. That's 21 out of the total have interest in agribusiness. So now the question is, why are agribusinesses failing to raise capital? Because we see a lot of funds having interest in agribusiness. The next being financial services. You know, financial services seem to be on most of the list because it's a tool for financial inclusion. You know, when most of these development finance institutions, as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, tend to consider financial institutions as a mechanism of reaching the wider markets. So we see a lot of financial services, healthcare, energy coming in. So agribusiness, this should be very interesting and should give a lot of hope. Then